Great meetings just don't happen. I know that's not a surprise to anybody, but they just don't. If you're fortunate enough to be in an organization now or in the past have been in one where great meetings took place, I promise you it was not an accident. Someone somewhere had a plan, they defined a purpose, and they put things together in order for that meeting to be a success. So it's very important to understand that. All these pieces go together, and I love the puzzle piece because it really shows you've got to put these pieces together. There's no one element in and of itself is going to make a meeting successful. It takes many things coming together. So you look at the planning, teamwork, and appreciation. Think about what that means. Planning means you have to have a plan of what are you trying to accomplish in this meeting. Who's ever been in a meeting that they know is because that's the every week meeting, right? It's because, well, we always have a meeting on Mondays at 10 o'clock. If that's the only reason you're in the meeting, I would say to you, you shouldn't be having the meeting. If that's the best reason you can come up with, don't have the meeting. I like the appreciation piece. You want to appreciate people's time. I mean, think about it like this. Every single one of us has at minimum one other place we could be and a multiple of other things we could be doing. But you chose to come here. I very much appreciate that. But your meetings are the same way. Even if someone's required to be there, you still want to conduct meetings in a way that shows an appreciation for the time that they're giving up, leaving their desk to come and participate in your meeting. The teamwork is the big thing too. Who's ever been in a meeting where, and we'll talk about this some later, where you have that person that it's basically their meeting. They like the sound of their own voice better than everybody else does, and it's really all about them standing up and doing all the talking and posturing for 30, 40 minutes, an hour. We've all encountered those. That's the antithesis of teamwork, so that doesn't work very well. So you've got to put the pieces together if you want to have a successful meeting situation. So now this applies to you because some of you may say, well, you know, I don't plan the meetings at my business. I'm just told when they are and I'm required to attend. So what I would tell you is, at the end of this, there's some takeaways I really believe that you'll have where when you do show up in those meetings, even if it's just a small piece of participation, you'll be able to impact the meeting somewhat. And I would tell you this as well, if you are someone who attends the meetings, it may well be that your boss or department head that calls the meeting, they don't do such a hot job with meetings, but you really do know that it's because they are overwhelmed. They don't have the time. They can't seem to get it done. So can you go to them and say, hey, Tony, I know you have a lot on your plate. I'd love to take that meeting planning off your plate and I'll execute the meeting and then you can just show up and participate, right? That could be a great service you could offer to your department manager, and maybe they've been waiting for someone to come and offer to do that for them. So there's a lot of ways to ingratiate yourself and put yourself in a position to positively impact those meetings. So for the sake of today, we're all going to be organizing meetings. Okay, so none of us for this conversation today will be someone who just shows up at a meeting. We're all the people who can dictate what happens when we go to the meeting. So what are some of the things that go wrong in meetings? Now, this is only a handful. You could make this list 10 times over and not run out of things. And really, I don't think there's just one. Often it's a combination of some of these. My least favorite is the ego dictates, like I talked about, the person who just commandeers the meeting and puffs their chest out and it's all about them. That doesn't accomplish much. You see a severe lack of planning because they were just kind of sitting there and really nobody, well, what are we going to talk about, or let's get this over with, right? That's no planning. The unproductive part, when you leave the meeting and we didn't accomplish anything, like I just sat there for 45 minutes for nothing. That is so frustrating, isn't it? And not taken seriously. This is when you can tell people don't take the meeting seriously. The meeting's at 10, everybody shows up between 9:58 and 10 in that short window. They walk in, they don't talk to anybody, they drop their stuff down, they plop themselves down in the chair. They're not taking it seriously. Now what's interesting about this is, like I said, it's a combination of these things, but if your ego dictates and you're running the meeting in that way and you haven't planned it well and you're not making it productive and valuing people's time, they're not going to take it seriously because you don't take it seriously. As the meeting planner, the person initiated, if you don't take it seriously, why should they? And then the worst sin of all is no input allowed. You make them show up and you basically say, because you don't allow their participation, I'm going to tell you, you don't really know, and there's nothing you have to say that I need to hear, so I'm going to make you just sit there and listen to me. The most insulting thing, and it happens all the time. It's probably the biggest missed opportunity in any meeting setting is not getting input from people in the room. And it's very much ego-driven in a lot of cases. So I know there's a lot of different types of meetings, but I came up with 4 boxes of meetings. And I think for the most part, every type of meeting can go into one of the 4 of these. So if we're going to think about meetings and how they need to be structured and executed, it's good to have sort of a loose understanding of what some of them look like. So the status update, I think that's the most popular, maybe not most popular, happens the most. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It's the most common type of meeting because this is like your weekly sales meeting, or you're going over reports or forecasts or budgets and things like this. And the idea is supposed to be we're keeping everybody up with what's going on. And sometimes it does happen, but sometimes it doesn't. It becomes, every department gives their take. And let's say there's 8 or 10 departments. So John, you go first, you give your take, and then you have to sit there. You don't have any interest, you don't know what they're talking about, you just sit there and listen to everybody else. And that's like the pattern, that goes back to the wasting time, right? Like, what am I doing here? I could have given you this in 5 minutes and I have things to do, right? So that's what these meetings tend to default to. Because they happen so often, it just becomes the routine and the habit. Well, we show up at 10 o'clock on Monday and we go through this, we go through that, okay, great, and have a good week, and rah, rah, rah. Doesn't work out too well though, does it? Often. It's very rare these types of meetings really have oomph. Now the information sharing meeting, these are pretty different because they can actually have a positive tilt sometimes. Particularly in project situations. You'll get teams sometimes that come together and they share information. So it's like, okay, my team does X, Y, Z, and you're like, okay, well we do A, B, C, so now we sort of understand how we're going to fit together and what our sequence looks like and how we can help one another. So those types of meetings can be very beneficial, although they tend not to happen as often. They can be really, really helpful. The trickle-down statistics, this looks 2 ways. Sometimes upper management finally decides that they're going to let people below know what's going on. Now, the reality is, let's say that there is an acquisition. It may not be appropriate timing to just tell everybody what's going on. Sometimes there's appropriate timing involved sharing information. Now, if the word is on the street that all these things are going on and the employees still haven't heard from upper management and they're starting to wonder and worry, well, then you missed your window. So the trickle down can work for you or against you depending on how you execute it as a meeting planner. So when you have these types of meetings, it's good to understand the timing that's involved in things like that. And then potential outcomes. This is great, but sometimes you see this as a time to dangle a carrot, to tell everybody about what they're going to get and what kind of commission they're going to get or how we're going to be successful, and trying to get maybe artificial buy-in. It's not, you haven't really given them much substance, but you kind of like a cheerleading kind of thing. So sometimes that can be a little dangerous to do that, but managers get caught up in that all the time because they want to sell the potential outcomes and how great it's going to be without giving you a lot of information necessarily how you're going to get there. So decision-making meetings, these are obviously important, and I don't think they happen terribly often, depending on the makeup of the company. But there's things you have to think about. When decisions are being made, you have to ask, is this who we are? Does this sync with our culture and the way we do things? Is this a fit for our people and the skill sets that they have when we're making decisions? How about budget concerns? Everybody doesn't have to be working in the financial part of the business to understand that there is a budget concern to everything. I mean, they're businesses after all. So we have to talk about that. How's this going to be received? This may be a great decision that we're going to make or a great project we're going to take on, but what are the residual effects? If it affects our culture negatively, what's that going to cost us? What's the return on investment of that time if we have to then go put out fires for 6 months afterwards because it didn't resonate with our team? So those are things to think about. And this is the biggest thing, biggest missed opportunity when you don't allow people to participate is, what do we forget to consider? Because that person, let's say Dan's that person, he comes dutifully to every meeting, and I run the meetings, I don't let anybody say anything. But we're going to make a big decision, and Dan has an insight that nobody else has verbalized. But because I didn't create the environment for him to speak up and share, he doesn't, and we go forward and we have an issue and a problem, or maybe it costs us some money, or we lose some time, or we lose some momentum. We could have avoided that if he'd have been able to present that great idea or that great insight. But because I didn't facilitate in a way that encouraged that, I missed an opportunity. That's very frustrating, and it's frustrating to him because what that does is reinforce, they don't care about me, they don't value me, they don't even listen to what I have to say. I could have told them that was going to happen. That starts to create a mindset that's very destructive.